Like you
Okay,
have a, yeah, I think we could start.
yeah, it's 7:05, so and we've got 27 participants signed on. So welcome to our KHPA Value Added Product Series. Tonight we have Robin Coulterman. She's going to talk to us about how to make some soap. And thanks to everyone for coming. So it's all yours, Robin.
Okay. Let me get my PowerPoint going here.
There. Robert said that he had not posted your handout yet, but he's going to post it when he gets home in about 10 minutes. So, okay.
Okay.
I
Well,
think
we'll
that's
go
what
through
he
this.
said to me. So anyway.
Okay. Well, I've been making soap since the early 2000s, and it's all because of Jolie and Becky. I went to one of their soap making classes at a beekeeping workshop and started making bar soap at that time. And then it just segued into the liquid making soap. So, and Becky is the one who got me started in keeping bees. She put on a new beekeepers class in Pottawatomie County in 1998. So there's some history there with all of us. So tonight I'm going to share just the basics of the liquid soap making. There's a lot of different areas, avenues that you could go off on, but let's just start with the basics. And since you watched Becky's presentation last month about bar soap making, hopefully everybody has, you kind of need a background before you go into the liquid soap. It is similar, but it does have a few steps that are a little bit different. So when I first started making liquid soap, I read this book, Making Natural Liquid Soaps by Catherine Fowler. And my copy of this book is well marked. It's highlighted. There's sticky notes in it. So I've read this from cover to cover. And she goes over a lot of things in this book. Now, last month, Becky talked about the cold process soap making, and that's because the temperatures are about 80 to 120 degrees. But with liquid soap making, it is a hot process. So you're using a hot water bath to cook your soap about 180 to 200 degrees. And the reason we need that heat is so that we have complete saponification of all those fatty acids. We want a clear soap when we're done. So in this book, she uses two different methods to make her liquid soap, the paste method and the alcohol method. And tonight I'm going to discuss the paste making method and the way I do it. I make a very large batch, so I have some steps that I do that allows for that. Now, this book also has a lot of chemistry in it, which I like, but if you're not a person who likes the chemistry, just follow the formulas and they'll work out fine. So the equipment you're going to need for this is a large enamel pot for your soap making, and then a second larger pot for your hot water bath. Now, this is a canner. It's my grandmother's old canner, but we're not using any pressure. It's just a big enough pot to hold my soap pot. And you need a smaller pot to mix your lye, and a whisk and a spatula and a large mixing spoon and your immersion blender. And then have a scale and paper towels for cleaning up, and then a plastic pitcher for measuring your oils in. And of course, you need your safety equipment. I know Becky talked about this last month too, and it's the same thing. Wear your gloves and your goggles. Don't take risk with your eyes, because no matter how careful you are, that lye or the soap can splash into your glasses. And I also use a mask just for when I'm dipping up the lye. It kind of gives off a dust and you don't want to breathe that. But when I'm actually making the soap, I don't wear the mask. So the oils that you're going to need, or the one I do in this formula, this makes a big batch. 3.5 gallons of concentrated soap is what you're going to end up with. So I use 40 ounces of coconut oil, 30 ounces of olive oil, and the lower grade olive oil is just fine, the pumice. Don't spend your money on the virgin olive oil, it's not necessary. And then 30 ounces of castor oil. So your coconut oil is the backbone of your soap, and it is highly soluble, so that gives you a clear liquid soap, and it also, that's what gives you the lather. The only negative side effect of coconut oil is that it's very drying. So you'll want to add a soft soap to that, a soft oil, I mean. So your soft oil should be high in lauric acid and low in palmitic and stearic acids, so that you have that clear soap. Olive oil, canola oil, or safflower are good oils, soft oils to use in your liquid soap. Now you can use a small amount of fats and oils that have palmitic oils in them, like tallow, cocoa butter, or palm oil. In her book, she has a couple charts that are a very good resource that tell all the characteristics of the different fatty acids and the makeup of those oils and fats. Now, the two that I've chosen, my soft oils, are the olive oil. And it is good because it penetrates the skin well. It's very mild, and it's a good base for baby shampoo. Castor oil is my second soft oil. And this is actually part oil and a part alcohol. And that alcohol also gives the liquid soap its clarity. The castor oil will speed up saponification. It's exceptionally mild, just like the olive oil, and it's also easily absorbed by the skin. Now you'll notice that this formula has no beeswax in it. Waxes do not work well in liquid soap. We will put honey in it, so that's our connection to our bee products there. A couple waxes that you can use are lanolin and jojoba oil. You can just use a small amount, and those are really good oils, like if you use shampoo out of the liquid soap. So you've got your oils, and your coconut oil, of course, is solid, so you're going to have to melt that. You want to put it in a pot, your soap making pot, and bring the temperature up to 160 degrees. And then, of course, you're going to need your lye. And here's the big difference between our bar soap and our liquid soap. We use potassium hydroxide for liquid soap rather than the sodium hydroxide. And the potassium hydroxide, the molecule is actually bigger than the sodium hydroxide molecule. So our final product, after the chemical reaction, that larger molecule keeps the liquid liquid. You're going to need about 1.4 times more potassium hydroxide than you do sodium hydroxide. And all liquid soap formulas have an excess of about 10% extra lye in it, so that we have a complete saponification of all of our fatty acids in there. Again, you want everything saponified so that you don't have any free fatty acids in your soap, or it'll make it cloudy. So that's totally different than our bar soap, where at the end of the trace, we actually superfat the soap to have the excess fatty acids, but here we don't want that. So later on in a step, we will neutralize that excess sodium or potassium hydroxide. And remember that the lye is caustic, so if you get it on your skin, you can wash it off with water, but you can have vinegar there. Becky mentioned this last month too, that vinegar will neutralize any lye that you get on yourself. So when you go to mix your lye crystals with your water, you want to do this outside or under a hood, because potassium hydroxide is very reactive to water. And in fact, when you add it into the water, you're going to hear a sound. It actually heats up very, very quickly. And it also cools down pretty quickly also. So just before your oils get to that 160 degrees, maybe 5-10 minutes before, I go ahead and mix my lye water up, and you want to let it cool down to about 140 and 160 degrees. Okay, so I'm going to show you a video of adding this lye water. See if I can get this to work. Can you still hear me?
We hear you.
Hopefully- Okay, so you can see I'm carefully adding the lye water into my oils that are 160 degrees. And in the bottom of the pot, you can see that there's the chemical reaction is already happening to that. So pour it in slowly. And then I just give it a mix with a whisk, but then I'm going to use my immersion blender here. And you can see it's already starting to foam up. And you'll see the foam just keeps kind of building. This could be because of my immersion blender. You know, it's not a commercial type, so it may be adding extra foam in there. You can use a squirt bottle of isopropyl alcohol to squirt on the foam to calm it down. But you'll see here, I'll take my whisk and just whisk it down. That's usually all I do. But you can see the foam just getting higher and higher. It's still pretty thin at this point. Okay. All right, so saponification is that big long word that means when the fatty acids and the lye mix together and they produce a chemical reaction that produces a totally new product, which is soap. I want you to notice on this slide that the temperature is 119.5. So our temperature has gone down from when we heated the oil up to 160 and the lye water. You could put this on the burner to get the temperature back up, but I've found that because I have such a big batch that it will start making the soap kind of foam up. So I don't add any more heat after this. Let's see. All right, and so now I'm going to show you the second video of what trace means in a liquid soap. It's a little bit different than on a bar soap. Okay, so I've been mixing for about 5 to 20 minutes on this, and you can see it's still pretty thin. And your trace is going to depend on the type of oils you have. If you use softer or more soft oils, it might take longer to trace. Also, your temperature, if it's low, it's going to take a little bit longer to trace, and your stirring speed. Your immersion blender, you're going to want to run it for a minute and then turn it off because you can't run it for 20 minutes at a time. You'd burn it out. But I want you to start seeing in this picture, you can see it's starting to thicken up, and look at the temperature. It is heating back up. That chemical reaction is speeding up. So it's going to heat up the soap. And if you look on the sides of the soap pot, you can see steam rising. Well, when you see that, you know trace is very close, and look how thick it's getting all of a sudden. It just kind of cascades. So you want to get your whisk out of there, or else it's going to be stuck in there very tight. And since there's such a high amount of coconut oil in this formula, it's almost like a taffy, this paste that is produced. If you use higher amounts of other soft oils, you may not get this taffy stickiness until after you've cooked it in the hot water bath for an hour or so. But with this formula, this is what it's going to look like. And you want to make sure there's no free liquid at the bottom of your pot. So You just need to make sure you stir that very well. Okay, so our trace, it's totally different than your bar soap. You can tell you've got trace for sure here. Makes a wonderful looking paste. Now, our second step or our next step is the hot water bath. So you're going to take that soap pot and you're going to put it in your hot water. And I usually have heated up my hot water in the hot water bath when the first thing before I start making soap. I get that hot water hot because you don't want to wait to heat that water up. You don't want the soap paste to cool down. So put your soap paste in the hot water bath, put the lid on the soap pot, and then you're going to put the lid on your hot water bath on. And again, no pressure here. This is not a pressure cooker. It's just the size of the pot that my soap pot fits into. And now we're going to gently boil that in the hot water bath for up to 3 hours. And during this time, that's when the saponification is going to be complete. So during those 3 hours, you can see that the soap may be puffing up. And this is because air gets trapped in there as it's heated. So maybe every 30 minutes, you want to open up the lid and try to stir it. This is so pasty that you really can't stir it, but you can mush it down into the pot. And that puffing up kind of slows down the saponification. So you really do want to kind of push it down in there. So before you get to the end of that 3 hour cooking time, you can start collecting your equipment for, you're going to dilute that paste that we have been cooking in that hot water bath. So the equipment you're going to need for that is a 5-gallon bucket with a lid, a blankets for insulation, and 2 more gallons of distilled water and a stirring stick. So after the 3 hours, take your pot out of the hot water bath. I've got it sitting on the counter here, and you're going to scoop this paste into the bucket that you've got ready. So you can see here, I'm scooping the paste into it. And also before the end of that 3 hours, you go ahead and boil those last 2 gallons of distilled water because you want really hot water to dissolve this soap paste. So you're going to pour that into the bucket with the soap paste. And you can also pour some of it into your soap pot to clean it out. It'll dissolve all of this soap around here and will clean up your soap pot for you. So you've got your stick and you want to stir your soap. And then we want to insulate this. We want to keep it warm so that hot water will dissolve that soap paste. So I have a fleece blanket that I wrap around it and use some other towels. Now, this formula has a lot of coconut oil in it, so that will dissolve really quickly. If, again, your formula is a little bit different with a higher concentration of other soft oils, it might take longer for that to dissolve. You can also stir it periodically with your stick to help it dissolve. Then usually by the next day, it's all liquid, it's soap broth. And now it's time to neutralize the soap. That's where we get rid of that excess lye that we put in there. If you happen to see some cream on the top of your soap broth, then that means you have some free fatty acids in there that didn't get completely saponified, and you will have to scoop those off. But with that 10% extra lye, you shouldn't have that problem. There are 3 different things you can use to neutralize the soap: boric acid or citric acid, but the one I use is borax because you can get that easily in the laundry aisle at the grocery store. So you need, for this amount of formula, you need 3 ounces of borax and 6 ounces of water. Now you don't want to add the borax dry directly to the soap. Bad things happen with that. So you need to mix it with the water first. So measure out your 3 ounces of borax and your 6 ounces of water and mix them together. Now it's kind of like cornstarch. If you quit mixing it, it settles to the bottom and solidifies. So you have to keep mixing that borax until you get ready to mix it into your pot. Now, usually as I'm pouring this mixture into the soap broth, I'm mixing it with my stick, but I'm taking the picture here, so I couldn't do both at the same time. So you want to mix very well, and you can see it'll start foaming. It's a very good foaming soap there. Okay, so for those of you who don't trust that all of the excess potassium hydroxide is out of there, you can test it with phenolphthalein. This is an acid-based indicator, and you can get it in liquid or powder form. I have the powder form, and I mix it with alcohol. And I've got an example here showing you two samples. The one on the left is a soap sample that's been neutralized. So when I put the drops in there, you don't see any color. But on the right, I have some that I knew had excess potassium hydroxide in it, the excess lye. And when you put the indicator in it, it does turn vivid pink. Now, I don't test every batch anymore after this because I've done it enough times. I know my formula is correct. And as long as I measure everything correctly, I'm fine with it. But for those of you who like to do a little chemistry, this is a good test that you can do. All right, so after the neutralization is when I like to add my glycerin and my honey to it while it's still warm. Now, glycerin is a natural byproduct of saponification. So you've already got some natural glycerin in your soap. And glycerin is technically an alcohol. Alcohol helps clarify your soap. So by adding a little bit more, it'll help clear up any cloudiness you might have. And an extra glycerin also helps the foaming action. Now, if you put too much extra glycerin in, it will inhibit that foam. So you want to kind of get the right amount. Glycerin is also a humectant, just like honey is. It brings in moisture to your skin. So like I said, after I neutralize, I like to add my honey and my vegetable glycerin while my soap broth is still warm. That way my honey dissolves, and you want to stir that very well so you don't have any honey settling to the bottom of your bucket. So the next step then is your sequestering. The sample on the left is some soap that's just been made. You can see how cloudy it is. And on the right is some soap sample that's been setting for a while. This formula, I usually let set about 3 days for all the particles to settle out of it, and any free-floating things will settle to the bottom of your bucket. Now, if you had a small batch of soap, because you could have or quarter this formula that I have given you tonight, you could go ahead and scent and color the whole batch if you wanted to, but I like to make a lot of different scents and colors. So I do my scenting and coloring when I bottle my soap. So after you're sequestering, and this, like I said, it could take, formula takes 3 days, but if you used a different formula, it could take up to 2 weeks. Doesn't hurt to leave your soap in the bucket, but you just don't want to agitate that bucket and stir up all of the sediment that has settled down to the bottom. So now we want to rack that soap. I'm borrowing a term from winemaking. You'll need your jugs and a siphon. And I have a siphon that it's self-siphoning here. I'll show you what it looks like taken apart. This middle part is a plunger, and you put that in the tube, and when you pull it up and then push the plunger down, it starts the suction. This thing is wonderful. I used to hand dip out the soap with a pitcher and pour it into the jugs, and that took forever. This is just so much easier to use. And here's the siphon put together. So you can see that I have my bucket on the table. It's higher than my jug, so you can get the siphon started. And in this picture, it's showing the plunger pulled up, and then when I push it down, it'll start that siphon so that it starts running, the soap will start running down the tube. This is a picture into the bottom of the tube, a bucket, and my tube runs all the way down into the corner of the bucket. Another picture over here on the right, you can see I have a block where I tilt my bucket up so that the soap broth is to kind of towards the corner and I get more of it out. The picture on my left is showing that I've almost siphoned all of my soap out. And this batch of soap was really good. I didn't have much sediment in the bottom of it, but it'll get almost all of it out, but none of the sediment that's settled to the bottom. And this picture on the right shows a clamp on the hose, which is really nice. When the jug gets full, I can put that clamp on and it stops the flow of the soap into the jug, and I can change jugs and then open up the clamp. So that makes that all really easy to do that. So when I'm done, I have 3.5 gallons of concentrated liquid honey soap here. At this point, the soap is 30% soap and 70% water. And then I'm going to do another dilution of 1-to-1 soap to water when I bottle it. But if you were going to use a pump bottle, you might want to just stop at this concentration. The foaming bottles seem to work a little bit better with more water. So that's why I do another dilution, but that's your choice, what you want to do with it. So the equipment that you're going to need to bottle your soap is a scale, your foaming bottles, a pouring pitcher, or I use a tea jar is what I use, extra water, your scent, and your coloring. Now you don't have to color the soap. I like all the different colors, but you don't have to do that. I buy my colors from Majestic Mountain Sage. They come as a powder form, and you have to use water-soluble dyes. You can't use pigments or ultramarines. So you just mix these up, the 3 primary colors, and it just takes some experimenting to figure out what color you want your soap to be. And then scenting the soap. So what I do, I make 10 bottles at a time. So if you do the math, if I have 10 bottles and they each hold 9 ounces, that's 90 ounces. So half of that is going to be soap and half of it's going to be water. So I put 45 ounces of water in my tea jar first, and then I add my coloring if I'm going to do that. You want to add the color before you add the scent and mix that up. And then you'll add your scent, and it's anywhere from 0.1 to 0.2 ounces of scent per bottle. So for 10 bottles, I'm adding 1 to 2 ounces of scent, depending on the type of scent. Lavender is much stronger than a citrus scent. So whichever one you add, you have to determine how much scent you want in there. And your fragrance oils and your essential oils are, of course, oil, and that's not going to mix with the water very well. So when you put it in there, you want to mix it, try to break up those oil globulars so it's well distributed through the soap or through the water that's in the tea jar right now. And sometimes I even add a little bit of soap and mix it really well before I add all the rest of the soap. So after I get that mixed up, I'll add my 45 ounces of soap into my tea jar and mix it gently now, because you can see I've already got foam starting here. Now my foaming bottles, what I use to put the soap in, and you can see here I am filling it from the tea jar, and there's is foam on there. But I just kind of eyeball it till I think I get to the 9 ounces. And after I get all 10 bottles filled, then I start weighing those bottles to make sure I have, it says 10 ounces there, but that's taking in the weight of the bottle. So you just add in your soap until you get up to the amount that you need in that bottle. And if you run out of soap, you can just top it off with some water. That's no problem. Now that foam, you can't put on your lid until you get rid of that foam. You could just let it settle out, but what I do is squeeze the bottle, and then I'll take the cap with that tube on the end and just swipe across the top of the bottle to get rid of the foam. And then the lid will go on. If you try to put that lid on with the foam, it's going to squeeze out the edges and it gets all over. So that's kind of a mess. And so I've got all my bottles. This is the setting on my bottling table. And then I will label them. I put my label, the name of the soap scent, on the cap itself, and then the label on the front. And then I have another label that goes on the back that has all the ingredients listed in it. One last thing I want to mention about your soap, depending on what essential oil or fragrance oil you put in there, you could have a sediment at the bottom of your bottle, or you could have some floating at the top. It all depends on what the fragrance or the essential oil does, but just be aware that that will happen. And then our final product, we have some beautiful colors of soap. You can see this one in the middle, it doesn't have any coloring. So that's what it would look like if you don't want to use the colors. But I like looking at all the rainbows. So I want to thank you for letting me present this. And if you have any questions at this time.
Robin, this was interesting. I have been doing liquid soap for a while, and I've learned a couple more things that it's like, oh, I was doing that a different way, and this will be better.
Well,
thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. I have, as I said, make this for quite a while, and I only use one scent. I use a scent that is like beeswax and honey. It's a scent supposed to, and my recipe that you shared with me, so I started with your recipe and then it's kind of morphed a little bit.
Yeah.
Has more honey in it. So I gave it to Steve's cousin, who is a very rigid diabetic, and he liked it because it's really gentle on his hands, and his skin is a mess. He really needs some help with skincare, but I gave it to him. And he's an old guy, and he pricks his fingers to test his blood sugar.
Oh.
He was getting really high blood sugar readings, and finally figured out it had something to do with the soap. Now, I don't have any idea whether the soap with the honey in it was actually raising his blood sugar. I would like to think not, more like contaminating his sample.
Yeah, probably contaminating it.
And so anyway, just
interesting.
just to be aware. But he said, made his hands feel really nice, which, yeah, it does. It's probably the mildest, kindest foaming soap. So many times you use that foaming soap and it's just like, now I need lotion immediately. And that's not the case with this soap. It's very,
I also like it as a shampoo. That's the only shampoo I use anymore.
Oh, well,
I make it, it's a little bit different formula, but that's what I use.
Very, very good. Well, I bet other people have questions as well, but I wanted to share that experience for people who are, maybe they don't prick their fingers anymore. They do other kinds of testing for diabetes, but he was like, what's the deal? And thought it was messing up his testing. So.
Oh, funny.
Yeah, or not, but thanks. Thank you very, very much.
Okay, I see. How much time average is it from start to the sequestering soap, and then from start to finish? What is a good time schedule for making this liquid soap? Let's see. So setting up, by the time you measure everything out and get everything ready, probably allow an hour at least, maybe 2 hours, to get it into the bucket and sequestering it. And then it's the next day when I want to neutralize it and add my honey and glycerin. So that probably just takes about 15 minutes. Then you're going to wait 3 days for that to settle out. And then you can rack it into your jugs at that time. And then once it's in your jugs, you can bottle however much you want at any time. So it's really a lot more forgiving, lot easier than your bar soap, because your bar soap, you got to be right on it and have it in the mold just perfect to that point. I hope that answered that question. Let's see. Oh, would you consider doing a soap class for us? Yeah, maybe if you want to make it in person there. Is there a shelf life on liquid soap? You don't need preservatives in this. I suppose you could put something in, but it's not necessary. The shelf life, I don't think there really is one, other than maybe your scent would just go away. I don't think there would be any problem with that. How much are you charging for those bottles? Let's see. I've seen prices anywhere from $4 to $6. I don't know, Becky, what do you, or Jolie, what do you sell yours for?
I was doing 6, I think, and I moved it to 7 this year.
Hmm,
6 on
6.
liquid soap. I think the question was about, would you consider doing a shampoo class for us? And maybe the question
Oh,
would be, how do you change from just liquid soap? How do you change your formula for shampoo? That might
okay.
be a better.
Well, you know, in that book that I showed you, she has a lot of different formulas for shampoos, even dog shampoo. And so I just picked out the ingredients that I wanted to use. And, you know, you calculate your amount of potassium hydroxide to your fats, just like you do in a bar soap recipe. And there are calculators like Becky showed last month that you can use to do that. I do all my calculating by hand, though. I like the math. Let's see. Is the 3 days critical? You need to let the soap settle out. So however fast that is, like I said, if I have a warmer room, it seems to settle out faster. You can just look at it, dip some out, and if you can see through it, then it's cleared up. I wondered if somehow it could incorporate propolis into the soap as an antibacterial agent. Propolis has beeswax in it. So again, that's your wax. It's going to make it cloudy. But hey, experiment, see what happens with it.
Yeah, experiment with it, and then you can do the June program.
Adding propolis to soap, yes.
So to answer Krista's first question about how long it takes, I think the first day when you're cooking everything, you kind of need to set aside 4 or 5 hours. I mean, you can do stuff in between, but I don't know. Would you say that? I mean, that wasn't really
Well,
her question, but I think
yeah,
you know what I mean?
the hot water bath, yeah, that's 3 hours right there. So yeah, you do need to set that aside. But I guess when it's in there, I'm doing other things. So I don't really think that's taking a whole lot of time. So you are correct, Jolie. You need to last at least those 3 hours. And then the time for mixing it up and then cleaning up too. So you are right. Let's see, am I missing any other question? Yes, shampoo class.
So how many out of that, I realize it depends on how much you thin it, but out of the 3.5 gallons, how many, I mean, I guess I could probably do the math, but how many jars do you get out of that?
Oh, you know, I used to know that. Well, you know, since I'm using the foaming bottle and I dilute that again 1 to 1, you actually have 3, 6, 7 gallons of soap is what you're going to have. And there's 128 ounces in a gallon. So whatever 7 times 128, then divide by how much your bottle holds. That's how many bottles you're going to get out of it. I think it's about 10 batches, I'm thinking, or about 100 bottles.
I'm glad I saw this because know the last time I bottled some, I forgot to add more water. I think I forgot that I had to do that. So glad this was a refresher. 'Cause
Well, you don't have to, it'll just be more soap in it versus the water, but I always found that the foaming soap bottles did better with the more water.
That's
And
a,
I never have dyed any. Have you dyed some, Becky? I never have
no, we
tried
just,
coloring them. I like the natural color, but
and I use that honey scent is the only scent I
Mhm.
use. And so it's all natural like that. So, um, that's a terrific point, Robin. This is about the cheapest soap
Yeah.
you can make per unit, with the exception of the nasty plastic jars. So where do you get the foaming bottles? Because that has, in fact, during COVID, that was a real challenge. My usual supplier did not have them. Where are you finding your,
Soaper's Choice, I think, is where,
no, that's where we get the
No?
oils. That's
I thought
the
they had some
oil
models
place.
too.
Do they?
there's, yeah, I get them confused. There's one that's called Four Soapers, and then there's Soaper's Choice, and I think one does bottles and one just does oils. So,
Yeah, and I forget now. I haven't ordered any for a long time. I need to look at that. I can find out.
and that's the
Yeah,
deal. If you
that's
order biggest quantities, then you get the best deal, but then you have bottles sitting around forever and you kind of go, what am I doing with them? But
Yeah.
so
I
yeah,
want to say I got mine from SKS bottle, but honest, I don't quite remember.
and I think that's who I couldn't get them from. I think I'd ordered from
Mm.
SKS and then they were out during COVID. So I went someplace else like American Plastics or whatever. I don't remember where, but it was like, they got more expensive. All good. But just, I think that's a really good point, is that truly this is about the cheapest per unit soap you can make. It's a very, where do you get your sodium or your potassium hydroxide, which is different than sodium, of course.
Yes. Well, to be honest, I haven't bought any of that lately. I, make soap for another soap crafter who sells it, and he always bought the lies for me. So he picked them up somewhere in Kansas City, and I can't tell you for sure where those were ordered from.
Well, holler if you need more, because where we get our lye from that Terrace packaging, you can get a 50-pound bag
Hmm,
of the sodium potassium hydroxide.
Potassium and yeah.
Yeah.
It lasts a long time. Yeah.
There's a question here. It says, you mentioned dividing the recipe.
Mhm.
Is that difficult? Just take what's there and divide it in half or in quarter. It should be the same amount. Should be fine. So 1 sit is in the gallon jugs. There's no hurry to bottle in the final foaming bottle. That is correct. I always have soap on hand so that whenever I want to do maybe just 10 bottles, I just take my jug and mix it up. So yeah, once it's setting there, it's ready to go. So that's why I like to make a big batch, because it takes just as much time to make a big batch as it does a small batch. So might as well. Any other questions there? I'm not seeing any. Did I miss any?
Robert says he's posted your handout on both NECBA and KHPA website. so-
Okay, so that what he's posted is just kind of a summary of all the steps that you go through. So hopefully you can understand that. Here's a question. What is the name of the book and author that you kept referring to? It is that's probably backwards, isn't it? Making Natural Soap, Liquid Soap by Catherine Failor. Failor. Making Natural Liquid Soap. It's a very common one, so you should be able to find that out there. Any other questions? Again, it's just a lot of experimenting. That's what I done, and kind of fun. See what new things you can come up with.
Well, this was a great presentation. Next month, we're doing beeswax and candle making, and I'm working on a very special presenter, but I haven't confirmed everything yet, but I think it'll be a good talk. So that's a
Yeah,
good
great job, Robin.
project for November. This was a great presentation. You're so organized.
Well, my first one, so got through it.
I learned from Robin. I traded a few queens for Robin to come over and teach me how to make soap. So that was a pretty
Yeah,
good
that
trade.
was fun. Yeah. So if anybody wants that, the formula I have for shampoo, let me know and I can share that with you too. Okay, so are we leaving?
We're leaving. Thanks.
Is everybody done? Okay. See you guys later. Bye.